After yet another season where the Miami Dolphins were close, but not really close enough, it wasn't that surprising to me to see the Miami Dolphins try to go out and make a big splash. Try to do something to dramatically shake things up, to sit there and kind of make a statement and really try to seize the AFC East by the gonads in 2015. And you could make the argument that the signing of Ndamukong Suh in free agency was exactly that type of splashy, big name type of culture-changing, landscape-changing type of move that the Miami Dolphins needed and needed very badly. And I most certainly won't fully disagree with that notion at all. Because when you look at Ndamukong Suh, he is, in some ways, to the defensive tackle position, you could argue what J.J. Watt is to the defensive end position, especially in a 3-4 defense. Now, Suh isn't quite the player of a J.J. Watt, mind you, but Ndamukong Suh is a flat-out beast. He could do it all. He is unblockable with one lineman. He can change the game. And you saw his impact on that Detroit Lions defense in 2014 that was ranked, I believe, second in the league. I mean, the Lions had an elite defense in 2014 in large part because it started with Ndamukong Suh, excuse me, and they built around it after that. So now with the Miami Dolphins, you look at a situation where you've got Cameron Wake on one side, Olivier Vernon on the other side. You bring in Ndamukong Suh in, you're expecting a similar type of impact on all three levels of the defense. You're expecting the type of impact that helps that Dolphins defense take that next step and go to that next level, and hopefully help this team break through that barrier and get to the playoffs in 2015, if not win the division itself. And when I look at this team, to me, there's a lot to like on paper. And I understand why the Dolphins are getting quite a bit of buzz because, frankly, I understand it, I see it, I get it, and I kind of believe in it myself. You got to start off with that defensive line. I mean, that's a strength of the team, even if you just had Wake and Vernon. Now you throw the best defensive tackle in the National Football League and Ndamukong Suh into the mix. Your run defense gets better. Your pass rush gets better. Your pass defense on the back end gets better because you have less time to stand back there as an opposing quarterback in the pocket and try to pick apart that secondary. I mean, that defensive line is kind of scary heading into this season. But that's not all. I like the receiving core quite a bit. The signing of Jordan Cameron in free agency away from the Browns, if healthy, he is a difference maker at the tight end position. Although you might argue he was a bit of a lateral move with the move of Charles Clay going to Buffalo in free agency, and perhaps that's true. But when you look at this receiving core as a whole, you've got Jarvis Landry, last year's second-round pick. I really, really like him. A great possession type of NFL wide receiver. A guy that, in my opinion, could be due for 90 to 100 receptions in 2015. Then they got a big vertical threat in Kenny Stills, a guy that you can line up all over the field. And then you throw into the mix their first-round pick of this year, Devontae Parker, when he recovers from his foot injury. You're talking about another guy that, to me, has big play potential all over him and should be a #1 wide receiver at the NFL level. A lot of weapons for a Ryan Tannehill to work with, even when you throw in the fact that he's got a Lamar Miller to throw to out of the backfield. And I look at Ryan Tannehill, and I know Ryan Tannehill doesn't get nearly the amount of love from that 2012 draft class that guys like Andrew Luck and Russell Wilson get. And at times I'm a little frustrated with Tannehill because he's not as good throwing the ball deep as he should be. He's not as willing to throw the ball deep as he should be. I think people sleep on Tannehill and how good he is. This is a good quarterback, a pretty good quarterback, who now is starting to get an improved offensive line in front of him, more weapons to throw to in the passing game. Now we'll start to see in 2015 that they've made that move. They've given Tannehill a lot of money. We're going to see if Tannehill can truly become that franchise quarterback. Because based off of what I saw, especially as the 2014 season progressed, it was interesting. Once you started talking about that Raiders game in London, and we talk of maybe them going to Matt Moore, Tannehill turned his season and, frankly, I think his entire career around after that moment. And he's the type of guy that could lead this team to at least the playoffs in 2015. I do have some concerns about this team, though. Yes, the signing of Ndamukong Suh is great and tremendous and all of that. And it will impact many different facets of their defense and really help that defense take a step. But their linebacking core is doo-doo, has been doo-doo for quite some time, and I anticipate it to not be all that good in 2015 again. It's just some of their deficiencies, again, might be masked by that great front that they have in front of them. I still have some concerns about their offensive line. I know their offensive line was better in 14 than it was in 13. Not that that's saying a whole lot, but I want to see them play together for an entire season, have everybody healthy, and be able to really give Tannehill the type of protection he's going to need to maybe go a little bit outside of his comfort zone, stretch the ball downfield a little bit more, two weapons outside like Kenny Stills and in particular Devontae Parker. I also look at their secondary at the safety position, and I'm not a huge fan. Not saying they're terrible, but I don't think they're particularly good. Again, though, they might be able to get away with that based off of the pass rush they're going to have up front. That pass rush is so critical. That front line is so key to so many things the Dolphins are going to want to do on defense and even to a lesser degree on offense in 2015. In terms of players that I think we ought to watch from this Dolphins team in 2015, I'll start off with Lamar Miller. Another guy that fits kind of with many of the other players on that Dolphins team. This Dolphins team just doesn't get the type of national notoriety and respect that maybe they deserve. There's more focus on the bullying scandal of a couple years ago than some of the really good football players that they have on this team. Now, obviously, people are going to be focused on Ndamukong Suh. He's the megastar. He's the big box office guy, so to speak, and that's understandable. But Cameron Wake is a stud as a pass rusher, absolute stud. You look on the offensive side of the ball, people sleep on Jarvis Landry, and I think people sleep on Lamar Miller. Is he ever going to be a top 5 running back in the league? No. But I think Lamar Miller is a solid option. Here's a guy that can run some between the tackles. You know, he's not a big, huge physical guy. He's not a super explosive guy, but he's also competent catching the ball out of the backfield. And when you look at that, and you see Tannehill with the weapons he has to work with in the passing game, and the fact that he should get some type of consistent running threat out of Lamar Miller in that backfield, it's going to help that offense, and I think Miller's a guy to watch, see if he could be maybe an 1,100 or 1,200-yard rusher this year. Then I look at their first-round pick this year, Devontae Parker. If he gets healthy and he can be what he showed he could be at Louisville, this guy could add a whole different element to that Dolphins offense. He can add a whole different element for Ryan Tannehill in that passing game. He most certainly could. And I'll say this, is that if Devontae Parker is healthy and plays to the level that I think he can even as a rookie in 2015, you might talk about the Dolphins having the best receiving core in the AFC East. Boom, I said it. And then, of course, on defense, the guy you ultimately have to watch is Ndamukong Suh. Sometimes you see these moves where a guy takes a shit ton of money to go somewhere else, and they don't always pan out. They don't always go that well. I hope for the Dolphins' sake that that isn't the case with Ndamukong Suh. I think this guy should pan out and should be a big-time impact on that defense. And I think the Dolphins organization will certainly hoping that he has the type of impact that he had on the Lions defensive unit in 2014, that elite unit that they had. The Dolphins maybe think that they have enough pieces in place, even though I don't know if I fully agree with that, to be an elite unit. It's going to start with Suh. That's where it begins, middles, and ends, frankly, for the Dolphins and their defense in 2015 is Suh. You give them all that money, and that's where it's going to be. In terms of their schedule this year, I look at really the early part of their schedule, the first 11 weeks of the season. I know it's really a big grouping here, but I think that's really important. When you look at weeks 1 through 7, they go to Washington, to Jacksonville, then they host Buffalo, the Jets, Tennessee, Houston. So you start off the season with 2 straight road games, but 2 what you should argue are winnable games. Then 4 out of the next 5 weeks, you've got games that in theory should be winnable as well, including a couple of games in the division. You look at Buffalo, you look at the Jets. In theory, those would both be potentially winnable games for this Dolphins team. Then Tennessee and Houston, again, a couple of more potential winnable games. So you're talking about a Dolphins team that if they have designs on making the playoffs this year and going a step above, perhaps challenging the Patriots, putting the Bills in the back burner just a little bit, and maybe winning that AFC East, it all starts here with this beginning stretch of the schedule, the first 6 games in the first 7 weeks. If they could go 5-1, 6-0, and they get off to that really hot start and kind of run away and hide a little bit, that would be very critical to their playoff and divisional chances in 2015. Because coming into weeks 8 through 11, the stretch gets a little bit more difficult. This is part of the reason why the Dolphins need to capitalize and maximize on that kind of softish first 6 games of the season, because the next 4 games they go to New England, to Buffalo, to Philadelphia, and host Dallas. 3 straight road games against potentially all playoff teams in 2015, and then a home game against another potential playoff team in 2015. This is a brutal part of the Dolphins schedule, the brutal part of the Dolphins schedule. Somehow, someway, they've got to find a way to win 2 of these 4 games, with at least one of them coming against either New England or Buffalo. They got to find a way to get it done here. Because if they sit there and start off 5-1, 6-0, and then they lose these 4 games in a row, then they've created themselves a lot more work in the last part of the season than they really need to, even though 4 of their last 5 games to end this season are at home, which could potentially set up very nicely for the Miami Dolphins. Now, when I look at this team, I see a team that is a playoff team in 2015. I see a team that I'm higher on than the Buffalo Bills, and dare I say the New England Patriots. I know a lot of people are higher on the Buffalo Bills because of Rex Ryan, the addition of LaShawn McCoy, Skip Whoop-de-Woo. But at the end of the day, you really have to ask yourself, well, the Bills' defense is most certainly better than the Miami Dolphins, although how much it is will remain to be seen based off of Suh's impact on that Dolphins defense in 2015. Are you going to gamble on Tyrod Taylor and E.J. Manuel as a combination at quarterback, or Ryan Tannehill? I'm just saying, I'll take Tannehill. Now, obviously, you would take Brady over Tannehill, but when I look at the entirety of the team, I think at some point in time the rug comes out from the Patriots a little bit, not too much, but a little bit. And the Dolphins have shown before they could beat the Patriots, and they will do it at least once again this year. And based off of that early stretch of the schedule, that's really easy. And if they could find a way in the middle portion of the season to kind of tread water, and then 4 of their last 5 at home, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the Miami Dolphins win 11 games and end up being the AFC East champions.